Hello and welcome to yet another evening with Medicine Man for the D2 campaign that we have started, which is in partnership with Dockier. And today we are going to have a very interesting discussion with my panel members, Aditi, Anupama, and Prithvish. Let me quickly give you a brief introduction of the panel members. Aditi is a healthcare entrepreneur, and before that, she has worked with Pfizer and Johnson and Johnson, and she is now with Sat Health, which is an AI-powered digital platform to build healthier communities across therapeutic areas with multiple healthcare partners globally. And then we have Anupama Rao Singh, who's the group country head, Latin America. She's the head of oncology and hospital business for Dr. Reddy's in the emerging markets. Anupama is a very accomplished professional, and she has been with Pfizer before joining Dr. Reddy's, and she has a very wide array of experience in topics like cancer care, market access, digital marketing, building personal brand for women leaders, and also has publications to her credit. And she loves cycling and all things fitness. And finally, Prithvish Banerjee, a senior director and business unit head of respiratory at Cipla. And Prithvish also has a fantastic background with Pfizer, Boehringer Ingelheim, Abbott, and also GSK Consumer Health and Unilever. So you can look forward to a very interesting discussion with them on what is right now happening in terms of digital transformation within Indian pharma. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to D2, which is an initiative by Dockier and Medicine Man to develop a thought leadership forum so that we have input from the practitioners as to what is happening in the pharma industry when it comes to digital adoption. So, first question that I will have is for Aditi. I think the pharma industry went into an overdrive when it came to digital adoption because of COVID. And we saw a plethora of activities from webinars to WhatsApp messages. It was as though, we were digitally less ever industry suddenly moved into what Salil calls as a preparedness phase and tried to do many things at the same time. So Aditi, do you think this led to lots of digital without much cohesiveness in the plan?
Yes, absolutely, Anup. And I think there are two things that we saw happening. One is that everyone had to use digital tools to keep going. There was no option. It was essential for survival through the pandemic. And while this was great because there's now been a lot more receptiveness to digital interventions, but the problem here are twofold. One is that unless these tools are implemented with a lot of thought process behind how they are actually enhancing the existing process or how they are replacing the existing process, it may not give the type of goals and outcomes that we are expecting. The second point is that a lot of these tools, although they were in existence earlier, they were more experimental, so they were not ready for large scale adoption. So they had to overnight undergo a lot of a change to be implemented across the globe, and that may have brought about a few instances of inefficiencies in the entire system. I think what we need to remember is that digital tools are, after all, tools, and it's how we link it to the existing systems and apply it while delivering healthcare that really makes a difference.
Great, that's very helpful. I think pharma people will be comforted at hearing that it's just a tool and we have to see how best we can adopt it. So Anupama, being an industry professional, if the digital adoption ladder, as Salil calls it, moves from unawareness to preparedness and then utility and finally expertise. So, in your opinion, what does it take to evolve along the digital adoption ladder? From preparedness, which is buying a lot of technology, to becoming digital, and utility, that is understanding the utility of the tools and tech and planning it according to the brand strategy.
Yeah, thanks, Anup, and very, very relevant and important question. And I will build on where Aditi left, and that is about it is after all a tool. So a lot of the digital adoption and transformation is actually change management. The tool actually is the product, but it's the change management, how it is executed in the organization, that makes all the difference. And broadly, I see it's related to process, people, and the product. A lot of emphasis is actually on the product because it's the shiny new toy that is there, and there is a lot of communication, there is a lot of talk around the product, but the process and the people sometimes do take a back seat. And what do I mean by process? um, the tool or the technology tying into the overall strategy of the company, of the BU, of the product, how that ties in, that communication and clarity needs to be given. And who gives that clarity and communication? A lot of the time there is a confusion that happens, that it is the digital team doing that communication, or it is the business team doing that communication. But at the end of the day, it is a teamwork between the two to actually see the correlation and the combination of both the tool and the strategy. Once that strategy is clarified and communicated to the larger team as to why is it that we are doing this, then comes the role of people, and that there are a lot of things we need to do: building the capability of the people, training them towards this. It's a lot of the time we underestimate the fact that just by giving a tool it will get adopted. uh, the adoption also takes its own time, capability, training. Everybody is at a different level. The last one is on role of there are certain roles which are very critical when it comes to digital adoption and transformation, and this role probably don't go by the designation. It's called a bridge. I mean, you will see this. The bridge people play a very important role in digital transformation. In my experience, I have seen this. Those departments or those BUs that have the bridge managers, they are like the bridge between the digital team and the business team, and they truly appreciate both sides and actually get this thing done. Having these roles in the initial time of digital transformation will be very, very critical. And lastly, give it time. Before it to become a way of life, it is not a short term thing. It needs to be done repeatedly, day in day out, over a period of time for it to become a way of life. I've seen this happening in CRM or OCM, digital marketing. When you give it time, it truly seeps into the organizational veins, actually, I would say.
Great, that's very helpful to hear that from a practitioner. So I think as you rightly said, the why is very important. As to we need to answer this question as to why we want to do digital, and how the strategy needs to be aligned to. We have to first fix the strategy right, and then align it to this new media of digital. And as you rightly said, training is very important, the process is very important, and then come the people that you have to train them and equip them. And very importantly, you mentioned the bridge. I think that bridge was missing. It was a bridge too far. You need somebody to hold hands with both sides, the digital team and the business team, and help them to understand each other and get the thing going till it becomes a way of life. And anything to become a way of life, as you rightly said, we need to give it a lot of time so that people get it. So, Prithvish, now that you heard our colleagues, how are companies preparing to scale from utility to expertise? And it'd be great if you can share some of your experience. for the benefit of the larger pharma community as well.
Thanks, Anup. And I totally echo the thoughts and the views put forward by Aditi and Anupama. See, the extreme situation of the pandemic has actually forced a behavior change in HCPs. When we look at the entire industry across, HCPs were always averse to a change in their way of practicing and interactions. Now, this change due to the pandemic has actually led them to adapt and adopt digital methods for interaction both with patients and during the pandemic with the industry too. Now, the biggest thing is over. That's the inertia of change. The inertia of change is now completely gone. And this should act as a catalyst to scale from utility to expertise, which is your question. The reason I am focusing on this is many a times when we change our behavior, we often lapse back into the old behavior. And that's something that we as a business do not want to do. So currently, without giving too much details, I can share with you that we are looking at addressing the opportunity from a HCP interaction and from a patient care programs that we run. From digitizing the channel space, we have still not started it, but probably in the near future, we will do that too. Now, coming to the HCP standpoint, we are looking at driving all our advisory boards, even when the COVID is gone, all advisory boards and focus group meetings through a in-house platform that we have to build the scientific content and later on like consensus papers and other things and further dissemination to that to the larger audience. So that's one part of it. The other part which we are working with the digital team is we are looking at a model wherein each HCP interaction can be transitioned to a phygital model. I know this word has been used often, but let me explain to you. Though it's at a very nascent stage, it holds significant promise in future and holds the key to scale up. In very simple terms, what we are looking at to deliver is to follow up the interaction between the first physical call and the next physical call with a digital intervention. But here content needs to be the key. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to move the HCP away from just a physical call and a visit and give him something in between. So the second call in most cases, we are trying to do away with it. The other thing that we are also trying to do is the doctors where we cannot reach or the HCPs where we cannot reach across India, we are trying to reach them digitally through our brand awareness. That's point number one. The other point is more interesting and I think you will be very happy to hear, which actually one of the key unlocks that you can see is the patient awareness programs. Now, I'll just give you an example that we currently do. And this is done by even by my earlier company, but the therapies were very different. So we have programs where we are deploying patient educators, physical, actual patient educators who go visit the doctor's clinic, visit the patient home and train them. But due to the pandemic, we have shifted to a digital patient educators which we are trying to build through the doctor references. Now, the same work which was being done by the physical educator. So if he was able to reach 10, today on a digital network, he can reach 25 a day. Though it's a slow start, but I see great promise that we are moving the educators from physical to a digital. Not to say that we have stopped the physical educators. We have kept the physical educators, but we are expanding the digital educators. Okay. Now, this can also hold true not only for respiratory, which I currently handle, but it's also true for nutrition, which I was a part of with GSK and Unilever, and also for companies like diabetes. So these are two of the major in-market things that we are trying to do from a HCP and a patient awareness program. When you look at it from a experience point of view as what has happened. Now, we started with QR codes in doctors' chambers. Now, as Salil was mentioning, the Aam Aadmi in India still does not understand QR codes to the level that we want. So what we are currently looking at is that we are also trying to engage in a WhatsApp bot through a number, wherein there is no intervention from anybody except through artificial intelligence and the WhatsApp messaging that goes in, wherein each and every video is for patient education without the brand. So let me tell you, it's without the brand, is now being thought about as one of the ways to reach the common man. It not only reduces your cost, but you can do a very targeted messaging and to the right patient, and it's always through the doctor. So it's not directly through the company, it is through the doctor. It's through a number which is being provided to the doctor, and the doctor can use it with his patients. it saves time for him in counseling. It saves time of the patient educator. It saves time and money for the company. The third thing that we have done immediately, and I'm sharing with you, is that we've also gone in packaging and tried to see how we can reduce COGS. You see, the COGS have increased significantly for most of the products, and all business units over here would agree to that. We have done one very small bit. We have removed all the inserts that were there in the boxes of the product, and we have replaced them with QR codes. So that brings down our cost even with a little bit, but it saves a lot of money for us. So these are the few interventions that the industry, or I would say, we are doing at the current moment. So back
Great.
to
Yeah, great. That's wonderful to hear that, Prithvish, practical examples of what you're doing. And I think the important realization, as you rightly said, is that the HCPs or the doctors and practically everybody has moved into the digital space. And that's not a habit that's going to change anyways. You know, I'm on Twitter and nearly 10,000 doctors follow me, and I'm seeing MedTwitter and MedEd hashtags. You know, they are trending every day. And doctors are finding it so useful to share case studies, peer-to-peer interaction, grand rounds, you name it. If you follow about, say, 500 of these doctors, you will be amazed at the amount of learning that's happening, or micro learning, I would rather say, that's happening on Twitter. And there are doctors who are doing great videos, putting on their YouTube channels, and then tweeting about it, and they're experiencing an upsurge in the patient footfalls as well, both physical patients as well as, you know, teleconsultation that they are getting it. And you mentioned another element of phygital, and you've given a good new perspective about phygital, that between the physical calls of the rep, you can still engage doctors by using digital methods. And I think that's a very fabulous way of maintaining continuity. In fact, in 2 years back, when we had a session with Samish Menon of Takeda, who's in charge of Takeda for Europe, he's saying, look, Anup, we don't have, like India has thousands of rep. I have just 20 or so rep for my European market. You know, so I definitely, they cannot meet the doctor like you do in India twice a month or once a month. They meet them 4 times in a year. So what does it mean, that we don't have any connect with the doctors during the rest of the time? We certainly do, and that is using different digital methods, and then supplementing the work of the reps. So that's very nice to hear from you, and you are doing something for the doctors, as well as, more importantly, the concierge kind of services, both in information as well as maybe what services that the patient needs. These are definitely something that the doctors are looking forward to, you know, and that's a wonderful way to keep the partnership going. And I think this is a real service that the pharma needs, in addition to the pill that pharma is so good at selling. So, Anupama, how difficult or easy has it been to change the mindset of your teams when you lead a digital transformation project? And any specific challenge that you can elaborate on?
Yeah, so you see varying degrees of challenge in changing the internal mindset. I see broadly people in a spectrum in the team as well. And on one end of the spectrum are the people who are like super excited about anything digital, and they are the first ones to pick it up, and they want to learn about it, try and do it. And there are those who are actually trying to understand, and they're open to a lot of digital tools and transformation. And then there are those who obviously feel that things need not change so much. So and therefore the mindset also needs to be changed accordingly, depending on the, you know, how the leader is. For me, it is like the country heads that I see. But among the main things, like whether it is training, whether it is alignment of objectives, one of the things that I see that helps change the mindset is to contextualize the project to the market or business needs. So, for example, if the need is that with changing times, the HCP interactions are changing, so you need to have omni-channel approach. So that's the global strategy. But how do you contextualize that to a rep or a product manager sitting in a country, understanding the nuances and realities of that country? I'm coming from an angle of international business. The problems are actually the same across the world. So if you spend some time to contextualize the global strategy towards their problem areas and how it solves them, then it's much more easy to have acceptance to this kind of project. And the second one is alignment of objectives between various stakeholders. A lot of the time there is the business team having their own objectives, the digital team having their own objectives. But if there is at the beginning of the year, the business team has alignment of objectives on the digital initiatives, then it's a whole different ballgame. It's part of their objectives. It's not just part of digital team's objectives. So that alignment it takes time. It needs specific discussions, and once that is done, I think then it is much more productive discussions that we have on the project specifics.
Great. I think you have made some very important points, like there are early adopters and there are laggards, and that's not just in the marketplace but within your teams also. So it may be useful to identify who are the early adopters among your team and use them to initiate the digital, as you said, change management. It's more of a change management to bring in those people, and those early successes can prompt the early majority and the late majority who form bulk of the people in any team to drive this initiative. So that's really nice that you shared about how to the alignment between the digital team and the business team. Again, unless otherwise it just becomes a tick box that digital says I have done it, brand management says I have done it, but they don't really believe in it because they cannot see the context as to how this really fits into the doctor's need, because they're so focused on me and my product, as Salil likes to say. So, Aditi, the next question is for you. The organization and team culture are paramount for transformation. There's a quote that says that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So, as someone who's working at scale to inculcate healthy behaviors in the society at large, what are your experiences, and is there anything that you can share that would be useful to our pharma leaders?
Yeah, absolutely, Anup. And I think the bigger challenge is at the organizational level, where there is investment and belief in digital transformation. But the next step, Anupama talked about convincing everyone and getting the team on board. But the next step, equally important, is the implementation. And when you get to the implementation stage, I think one of the important things that people need to remember is that they need to reimagine the way they work. It is not just about digitizing an existing process. It has to be a complete reimagination of how you can see this process changing to make digital adoption truly impactful. So to have that kind of expertise and to be able to bring about change at that scale, you need to be it's almost as simple as drilling down to the basic user journey. So whether it is HCP engagement or whether it is patient education programs, you need to go down to what is it that the HCP or the patient is doing at that time that you're putting in your intervention. So to give you a simple analogy, it's what you put in a brochure versus what you put on a digital channel will have a completely different user journey. So it requires you to go back, put on your designer thinking hat, and then reimagine the journey, and then implement the process as per the journey. So it may be very different, where the interactions happen may be very different, where you are actually achieving that final step of behavior change may be very different. if it's a physical process versus a digital process. So I think at the organizational level, even with the people who are leading the implementation phase, they need to understand that it's the entire process has to be relooked at to be able to bring about real change.
Great. That's very insightful. That what you have shared. That it has to begin at the top. That the people who are leading it need to have clarity about what is the way forward, so that we don't end up doing what we call as paper on glass. So that the same PDF is the same brochure is converted into PDF and put on an iPad, and the iPad loses all its charm that it has got. So I think that that's very useful. And then the behavioral changes of people is to understanding the user journey, that how do they navigate. Last 2 days, some chairs have been following me for quite some time. I don't know, I clicked on one chair and now there are 4 brands following me. I almost feel that doctor will have a similar experience when 4 reps with the same brand following him, trying to get their market share. So, Prithvish, you had a very varied experience, and it has helped overcome cultural challenges, team dynamics, and mindset issues. There's a need for cross-functional collaboration as a prerequisite for any transformational exercise, including digital. Customer centricity is not the domain of sales and marketing alone, but that of the whole organization. We would really appreciate to hear about your experience in any projects, that how easy or how difficult it was for you to bring about these changes.
Yeah, so I was hearing Anupama and I totally agree to her. But just to put forward my point, it reminds me about a childhood story which all I've heard. Transformational projects like digital are like working with 7 blindfolded people who are trying to feel the elephant from different sides and giving their own perspectives. So that is, if I have to sum it up in one word, that's the way it looks like. And I have worked in consumers, I have worked in pharma. Believe me, both the places, it's the same. And if I have to bucket them out, I think Anupama has already done them, but just for the sake of reiteration, I think onboarding the stakeholders on one single page, wherein business results are not immediate and visible, is something that's the first thing that we need to get across. Once that's done, the second obstacle that comes is the funding. And funding, I'll come to funding because now P&Ls are very tight everywhere. And whenever you ask for a transformational project, it's like what extra business can it give? And finally, what Aditi mentioned, getting the team to prioritize and build in the brand plans and execution plans. Now, when I say this, I have realized that management need to think beyond immediate results and focus on the opportunity that is at hand. And this will always need a top-down project management approach. It cannot be just nice to have, good to discuss, and as Anupama was saying that some people are very gung-ho and then some are not so gung-ho about it. But even people who are gung-ho rarely understand digital the way you need to progress. Not to say that I understand it fully, it's even new for me. But it needs to have a discussion at the strategy level in your short term as well as long term. So 1 to 2 years in short term and what you're going to achieve in the next 5 years. It should be inbuilt, and from there on your brand plans and execution plan should come up. In terms of financials, I think it's very hard to get the commitment of the management right away. So here in my own experience in my erstwhile organization, so I worked with Unilever and I had to tweak my approach and that helped. So instead of fighting for a full one-go commitment, I proposed a pay-as-you-go model to them. Now, when you do that, it becomes a little more palatable to the management. It's not heavy on the P&L, and it keeps the project management on the toes. So answering the challenge which Aditi was mentioning, that the execution team needs to be aligned. So if you have a pay-as-you-go model with milestones, that's something that helped me do it. Let me tell you, and I don't know whether you believe it or not, it took me 9 months from conceptualization to land my first platform in Unilever, which by any standards of pharma was much more digitally ready at that point of time. Now, this is talking about a very big organization, and with due respect. But this is what happens when you conceptualize it and it's new and you're trying to launch something within the healthcare space. There is always a question, how much is the return? And that's where the problem starts coming. So we need to look at a very top-down approach on this and then build it, as Aditi was saying. Project teams also need to be able to gather insights from the learning. Now, when I say pay-as-you-go model, what happens is that what you think in the planning room may not work in the field. As I gave you an earlier example of QR codes. It's very easy for somebody coming out of a BE school telling we will use QR codes. But looking at the market, if you have to reach UP, if you have to reach Bihar, if you have to reach the Northeast, how many people do actually know how to use a QR code? So that's where those are the few insights, and that's just an example. Those are few insights that the team needs to work upon immediately. And it's like, if I have to give an example, it's like painting a car while you're driving it. That's how difficult it is to actually do a transformational project.
Yeah. Great. That's very useful. I'm sure that we all heard that mending an aircraft engine while it's in flight, and you have given a new example for us of painting the car while you're driving. So great. It's so what it brings across is that it's not an easy task, I think, so that the mindset should be very clear, and at the top also you need to be very clear that it's not going to be an easy journey, but with the clear understanding and better understanding and adapting, like you said, the QR codes. I experienced this in the early days of lockdown. There were no menu cards in any restaurant. They said, scan the QR code. And you couldn't really do it so well. And I've seen that another point that you raised, going back to the old mindset. And now the menu cards, printed menu cards, are back in the, in the restaurants. But I recently went to a McDonald's and I was amazed at this kiosk where you do all the ordering and paying and everything, and you just get a number, that's your table number, and your order gets delivered in no time. And they have a promise for the drive-in people that in 48 seconds, the order will be ready from the time they drive in. So it's amazing that what digital can do. So we are seeing digital transformation all around us, and I think healthcare is too important subject that it should not be left without digital, and pharma should take up the lead. And there are people like Aditi who have done a lot of work, who understand patient behavior, and use them as a kind of a bridge. And then we have people like Preeta from Docure and Dr. Harshit Jain, who has been in the space of providing service to pharma industry for a long time, and use their help, their insights to really bring about a transformation in their organization. So thank you, Anupama, thank you, Aditi, thank you, Prithvish and Preeti and Salil for making this happen. I think we've done a very crisp conversation, and it should be really useful to our pharma friends at large. So thank you very much and have a great evening. Salil, over to you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Anup.
Thank you so much.